First of all, this book, we've been talking about Endgame. It's spilling the beans, apparently, over the royal family, including allegations that Meghan named 2 members of the royal household who she claims took part in conversations about the colour of her unborn child's skin.
So, could the royals be racist? We're joined now by showbiz reporter Stephanie Takyi and anti-racism actress Imarn Ayrton to debate it. Welcome to you both. You're both very well known to viewers on our programme. Who should we start with first? Stephanie, to you, what do you make about these, we must say, allegations in this book?
Yes, Andrew and Bev, I don't think the royals are racist, because I think, in order to be racist, you need to have specific examples where someone has really attacked the colour of someone's skin or made a very defamatory comment about someone's race. And I don't think that's the case here. I think what's happened from back with the Oprah interview, we've had these unnamed royals who've made specific comments about Archie's skin colour. To be honest, that's more a kind of thing anyone would be kind of, a bit curious to know what colour is the child's skin. Most cases with children when they're about to be born. So I think until we name who these royals are and what these specific incidents are, we cannot say they are racist.
Imarn, just respond to that. Is it okay for a royal to have said, I wonder how dark this baby's skin will be?
No. So good afternoon, or good morning.
Good to see you.
Good morning to you. Thank you for your point. I appreciate that you said that people need to give specific examples in terms of racism. Well, I'll be honest, with all due respect, I think you're actually referring to overt racism where specific examples are needed, right? So our frame of reference in this country is overt racism, obvious, deliberate forms of racial prejudice. And so this is why it's quite easy to lead with the rationale, which is I need to have a very clear, cut, amazing, obvious example of racism. So I think what you're actually referring to, Stephanie, is overt racism. I think in this particular context, we're actually talking about 2 things: covert racism and internalized racism. So now, covert racism, as you know, you've heard the microaggressions. Stephanie, I've seen you about, about the term microaggressions, right? They're flung about all day, every day. And the reason why is because it's a normal thing, right? We just get these kind of subtle behaviors in regards to racial prejudice. So I don't think you need anything obvious and clear cut, because covert racism is very subtle. I think that's what we're referring to. And in terms of internalized racism, it can actually be broken down into 3 points. So firstly, colorism, right? Stephanie, I'm going to talk to you on a real basis right now. Black woman to black woman. Tell me if I'm wrong. Honest to God, tell me if I'm wrong. Colorism, which is basically the idea that certain skin tones are more desirable than others. And this is, in terms of context, connected to slavery, connected to colonialism, connected to racism, connected to the house Negro and the field Negro. So I want you to appreciate this is a very similar dynamic that we're dealing with now in terms of colorism. So the colour, in terms of what I'm trying to say, let me just finish, please, I'll keep it quick. In terms of what I'm trying to say, there are black people in my family. For example, I have many mixed race people in my family, and no one on the black side spoke about colour or skin tone my cousins were going to be. It's only white people that actually did it. And the reason why is because if it's not an issue, you won't talk about it. If it's an issue, you'll talk about it. If you have racial prejudice and if you appreciate that colorism leads to privilege and white privilege and light skin privilege and pretty privilege and texturism.
Okay, Stephanie, Imarn, right? Nicely explained. Let me just ask Stephanie to pick up on that point then, that perhaps these royals, unbeknownst perhaps to themselves, as they're culturally conditioned in that environment as well, they were making a statement that was related to whether that child would be more valuable or less valuable based on the amount of melanin in their skin.
No, I don't think that's the case. I totally understand what you're saying, Iman, in the sense of colorism. That's even an issue that plagues among black people. That's even within our own family. So I refuse to label that as racism, because that's a mindset that has developed so many years and generations about how light a child's going to be, how dark a child's going to be. In terms of the royals, ignorance has been blitzed. We can't say that the royals haven't gone through a lot of changes over the last few years where they're addressing when it comes to race relations. But my problem is calling people racist very loosely is a problem, because then when we do have real incidents of racism out there, people won't take it seriously when we try to bring it down to these kind of minute situations. It's not fair. It's not fair we don't know who the royals are in question, and it's not fair to be to be branding racism when we need to really define what is a racist. We can't be
Using
just using
education
that
and knowledge.
terminology.
Go on.
Stephanie, you're being very emotional right now, with all due respect. With all due respect, you are genuinely, you are. You
I'm not
present it really well. I'm going to
being
break it down to you if you don't mind. I've heard you. I've genuinely heard you, and I do apologise. I did interrupt you several times, and you know, you are politer
Black
than me.
women to black
I
women.
apologise. I shouldn't have interrupted.
Go on, Iman. Pick up on that
But I
point.
just wanted to interject. Let me just say something real quick, Bev. You've spoken about it in terms of generalizing. We keep using this frame of reference in terms of racism, and you keep kind of leading with this thought that racism is overt, obvious, deliberate, direct forms of racial prejudice. That is not racism in this country, Stephanie. That is not the prevalent form of racism in this country. I can give you facts. I know we haven't got time, so I'll just keep it brief. You need to open your mind. With all due respect, open your mind. It's not about obvious forms of racial prejudice. It's now about subtle forms of racial prejudice. And black people internalize that racial prejudice, and they now start talking about, I wonder what colour my child will. So that if she's light skinned, if she has long flowing hair, you're wearing a weave, Stephanie. With all due respect, you are wearing a weave. There was something in your mind that said, I'm going to put on white people's hair right now. I've been there. You saw me with my blonde wig during Black Lives Matter. I've been there in terms
What I want
Oh,
to ask
okay,
you,
Stephanie.
Iman, let's just bring Stephanie in. Just 1 second. This only works. You both have valid opinions. You both have valid opinions. This only works if we hear them. My issue, Stephanie, when I'm hearing Iman talk about subtle microaggressions and a sort of subconscious racism, you can never defend yourself against allegations of racism if it's coming from a place of being accused of being, because whether something is a microaggression or whether it's subconscious is entirely subjective, and therefore you cannot defend yourself against it. Stephanie, go on.
Well, this is what my problem is, because she's saying my problem is that I'm talking about overt racism. Overt racism is when I can have facts. How can you judge someone about internal racism? What is your facts on someone's thoughts or feelings? Then we can all be accused of racism, not just white people, black people too. We need to have real evidence before we're going to start branding people racist. It's not fair. I'm a black woman, trust me, I've been through racism experiences, but if I'm going to call someone a racist, I better have the facts. I better have facts of what they've said to me and when. If someone has some discrimination against me...
Go on, Iman. Just respond to that.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm coming out of frame. I do apologise. Stephanie, you're getting me all excited right now. No, I fully agree with you. So I appreciate everything you just said is accurate. I'm not going to negate what you just said. Spot on. I'm there with you, sis. I know Andrew feels me and I know Bev feels me. You need to have facts, right? We've had this conversation. If you're going to say something, let's not live in the world of delusions and entitlement and fabrications and all of these things that are ultimately leading to extreme wokeism. Let's not lead with that. I agree with you. You need evidence. But this is what I also want to say in terms of nuanced life, right? We know that everything isn't black and white, isn't left or it isn't right. There's so many kind of grey areas, and this is what we need to take into consideration when we're talking about racism. So if we're going to talk about covert racism, I agree with you. You need evidence, but you also need to take in consideration that covert racism is the reason why it's so prevalent within our society, because it's subtle and you don't need evidence. So therefore you can get away with it, perpetuate it within your organisation, perpetuate it within your institution, and no one can check you. Why, Stephanie? Because of what you just said. You need clean-cut evidence. You don't. Not when it comes to covert racism. And this is why we transitioned from 1998, the Human Rights Act.
Iman, we're going to go back to Stephanie.
Thanks, Iman. Go on, Stephanie.
At the end of the day, we are all human and we can all be guilty of having some forms of discrimination or racial thoughts. We're now in this generation where we can speak about these things openly, but at the moment you have to understand, especially with the royals, which this debate is about, some of them come from a very old school mindset where now when we're moving to this new modern monarchy, they have to be addressed on these issues. But calling them racist, I think that's a bit too far. I think they do need to address their attitudes and their mindsets to people of colour, as we've seen in the past. But to them rebranding them racism, I just think it's a bit too harsh. And I think the stuff that you're complaining about, black people can be equally criticised for such issues.
Go on, Iman, last word to you.
I agree. You have to add context. Sorry, I know we've running out of time and you've gotten used to me. I can talk for days. Stephanie, you have to add the context. 270 years of every king and queen within this country advocating for the enslavement of Africans and colonization of these Africans. We're talking about from Elizabeth I to James IV. This is a fact. 270 years of advocating for subjugating, oppressing Black people in Africa. And we're not even talking about neo-colonialism, right? We're not even talking about what's going on right now. We're just talking about 400 years ago. So you cannot talk about these things without adding context. If you're going to talk about racism within the royal family, you need to think about context. You need to think about colorism. You need to think about texturism, hair. You need to think about assimilation, the amount that's or the degree in which Black people are willing to assimilate. And this is why we have a frame of reference that we do in terms of overt versus covert. And we also need to take into consideration, if we're going to talk about racism in this country, you have overt racism, which is obvious, deliberate and direct, and you have covert racism, which is subtle and
much harder to prove. And much harder to prove.
Absolutely.
Imarn Ayrton, Stephanie Tetchy, great debate. Thank you so much, ladies.